We got a little bit of rain this morning, and we'll probably have a little bit of rain as we go on through the weekend. But I think a very nice Sabbath day. So, like I said, this is the Auburn City Seventh-day Adventist Church, if you're streaming us. This is the Bible study time, our Sabbath school time, and my name is Terry Campbell, and this is June 17. And that is, last year at this time, I remember talking very extensively about Juneteenth, which is coming up here on Monday. And so much so that when they titled the Sabbath school for that last time, it was Terry Campbell Sabbath School / Juneteenth. So I'm not going to talk so much about it today, so if at all. So a few things to remember, and I know they'll be discussed again, but next week is camp meeting, and we will not be meeting here, and of course there won't be any sort of streaming or anything here. We'll be up at the school, up at Auburn Academy, where camp meeting is going on, and I'm going to put a little plug in here for my son, who is going to teach a class. So if you're at camp meeting during the week, this coming week, Tuesday, starting on Tuesday, I'm not sure where Jonathan is teaching his class, but he's going to be teaching a class on how we got our Bibles, and he'll be talking about various translations, and he'll be talking about the process of getting the Bible that we have today. I know I've seen a little bit of his presentation that he's done at his own church, and it's very interesting. He has some slides showing some of the old manuscripts, and that's an area of expertise for him. He's getting his doctorate in his doctorate involves looking at a couple of these old manuscripts that are actually clear around the world. Thanks to the modern technology, he can study this ancient Bible, which is, I think, actually made up of the 4 Gospels, this particular bit of writing. And then he can, and here, clear around the world, he doesn't have to go and look at it. He can look at it from around here. Anyway, so, like I said, proud father, near Father's Day, sure, why not? So if you have an opportunity, look for Jonathan Campbell on your camp meeting schedule, and I know he would enjoy that very much. So last week, was Dick Smith, came and he did part 1 of our Sabbath school lesson, and I'm going to do part 2. But I will tell you that I was tempted, because I went back, I wasn't here last week, but I went back and I looked at the Sabbath school from last week, and if you don't like what I'm saying this morning, just go stream what Dick said, because he had a wonderful Sabbath school, and I'm going to encourage you, if you hadn't seen it, to go and see it. Because when I was done, I said, well, what can I say this morning? We will soldier on. But before we do that, let's have a word of prayer. Dear Lord, I want to thank you this morning for your Sabbath day. And I want to thank you that we can be here, and we have no difficulties in meeting here together. No one is telling us we can't do it. Thank you that we have such freedoms in order to, in our meeting together, in our worshiping on your special day. Be with your church around the world. Some places it is difficult to meet openly on a Sabbath day. Be with those places especially, and help your word to grow mighty around the world. And be with us in our Sabbath school this morning as we read your word, as we study, help your Spirit to be a part of our Sabbath school this morning. For Jesus' sake, amen. Oh, I need to say one more introductory thing. I don't know how well you can see this or not, or if you can even see it on the streaming, I don't know, but I am wearing a Christmas tie. And I didn't accidentally do that. I did that on purpose this morning. That wasn't just me going into the closet and accidentally picking out something. I have a friend, or I had a friend. He passed away actually quite some time ago. And he had a mantra that he lived by. And his mantra was, every day is Christmas. Live your life as though every day was Christmas. And I think about him about this time of year because it is about 6 months from Christmas, or till Christmas, and every year on around June 25, you would see Paul with a bag of candy, a little of candy canes, a bag of candy canes, and he would see you, and he would give you a candy cane, and you had to say, to him, every day is Christmas. So in honor of Paul, who passed away several years ago now, I just wanted to point out, this is not an accident. I just wanted to let you know that we're going to live like every day is Christmas. What that means to you, I'm not quite sure, but I know what it means to me, and I want to just express that. Every day is Christmas for Paul. Okay, now the last time I did Sabbath school, it was on the 2 women in Revelation. And I hope that I've kind of pointed out to you, I hope that you got the idea that even though there are 2 women represented in Revelation, that you have the good and pure woman with the sun and the stars, and she flees into the wilderness, and then you have the bad woman who is on the beast, but she's coming out of the wilderness, or rather, John goes into the wilderness to find her, and the idea to glean from that is that it was the same woman. The woman who was fleeing persecution or fleeing the devil in the early part of the chapter is the woman that has now joined together. The bride of Christ is now the joined together with the political power, and she is this other thing. Now, and that kind of leads into what we're going to talk about today, because we're going to talk about God's church and what happened to it. And this was sort of the beginning part of it. God's church going out to conquer, going out in purity, going out undefiled, and then persecution driving it into the wilderness, but then persecution But then as that history is going along there, we find that church has united itself with civil power. It is now this other thing, okay? And we watched the beginning of that when I was here last time. We were talking about that. So now, today, we're going to talk about sort of the other end of that. We watched the beginnings of it. Now we're going to look to the ends of it. But specifically, the lesson is about the seal of God and the mark of the beast. And what I'd like to start with, I've got a little piece of audio that I want to I want to have everybody hear. Not quite yet, though. So those of you that remember Mark Black, who was here a few years ago, that he's now moved. He lives in College Place, actually, now. But he is involved with Pathways to Health. Pathways to Health is a program. I think we've done one in Tacoma in the last few years, but they are a time for where you gather together doctors and dentists and just all kinds of different nurses, different sorts of medical personnel and other people, and you give, you're giving people free medical care. Come down here, get a free medical care. And this particular one that Mark is going to talk about occurred in San Antonio. I think it was done immediately prior to the general conference that was down there. And he's going to tell a story about a man that he met that was getting some free dental care. And, okay, I think that's enough of an intro. I should say one other thing. The Pathways to Health is associated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And so everybody that was there would have like a T-shirt, Pathways to Health, a program of the Seventh-day Adventist Church or something that was written on there. Okay, now I think we're ready. So if you could go ahead and push that button, it's just a little 2-3 minute thing.
Tell me about your church. Where can I go to your church? I want to go to your church. This is a religion I could believe in. What is this about the Sabbath? And over and over and over, I got to share Bible studies. I had some dentists come out. They saw me out. I was trying to take care of a problem in hospitality, and I was outside the triage on the dentist area, and the dentist saw me, and they came out, and they got me. They says, "Hey, come in here, come in here." And they brought me in. They says, "Listen, here's a patient that he's asking us about the mark of the beast. Tell him about the mark of the beast." It's like, what? And so I got to sit down, and I didn't say, well, now the mark of the beast is Sunday, and you got to keep Sabbath, or you're going to get the mark. No, I shared the gospel with them, and I showed how the issues in Revelation are about worship of God, and whether our loyalty is to God or to a system that is really against God because it's been perverted. And then he says, well, yeah, but isn't it a chip on your forehead or your hand? And I talked about the seal of God. I says, well, there's a seal of God, and there's the mark of the beast, and you're going to have one or the other. So if it's the seal of God, are we going to expect that one day we're going to see this stamp on everybody's forehead and say, oh, you have the seal of God? And he goes, well, no. And I says, no, you know that can't be what it is. No one teaches that, because it has to do with where our loyalty is, how our minds are committed to Christ, how we find it our joy to submit our thoughts to obedience to Christ, and to be brought into captivity to obedience to Him. And so then I went back and talked about what the mark of the beast was in relation to the seal of God, and how we're either going to receive a mark, maybe there's a chip on the hand or the forehead that is to enforce that mark, to keep you from being able to buy or sell, but that's not the mark. The mark is whether we're going to be loyal to a system because we're afraid we do it, even though we don't believe it. We go along because we're being compelled, because it says, cause those that don't receive the mark to be killed. But that's what he'll try to do, is compel us to believe it. If we don't believe it, if we don't get the mark here, he's going to compel us to have it here. That's his intention. And he got it, But people were hungry, and people were anxious to know what we believe.
What is the mark of the beast? That's what we're going to talk about today. And so before we dive into the answer to that question, what do you suppose this fellow who was in line to go in and get some free dental treatment, what was he afraid of? Why, in the midst of all of this things that was going on, was he all of a sudden wanting to know about the mark of the beast? It's kind of off the wall, right? You don't just, when you go to the dentist's office, if you go to the dentist's office and you sit in the dentist's chair, does the mark of the beast, is that the sort of conversation that you have with the dentist on a regular basis? Why was this man, let's kind of suppose here for a moment, why might this man have been all of a sudden wanting to talk about the mark of the beast in this line, or rather, when he's sitting down to talk in the dentist's chair? What do you think? What do you think? What was he afraid of? Let me ask that. What was he afraid of? Not sure? Everybody's wondering? So he's in line. He goes in to see the dentist. Do you suppose that he might have been afraid that they were going to give him the mark of the beast? Would that have been a fear that he might have had? He's gone in. He's signed up for free dental care. He stood in line. All these people wear the T-shirts, Pathways to Help, a division or a program, I think that's what it says, a program of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. You get in line, they offer you free dental care, you get in the chair there like that, they give you some Novocaine, and then boom, they give you the mark of the beast. I know that seems absurd as we sit here in a Seventh-day Adventist church on a Sabbath morning. But that is a reality that people do deal with. They say, maybe I get in the wrong line at the post office, and instead of getting stamps, I get stamped. Or I go to the wrong church. And somebody, when you walk in the door, says, here you go, and you get the mark of the beast. There are some, yeah, Roger, just a minute. There are some very real ideas. I mean, there are ideas that are unreal, but they are out there that people don't know what the mark of the beast is.
Yeah, but it seems in that scenario that the person doesn't have to make any choice of anything. Mark of the beast, you choose one or the other, but in that situation, it's just given to you randomly. They don't know anything about what you think about concerning God or not. And of course, I think a lot of people didn't want COVID vaccine because they're afraid they may get, but again, there's no choice in it. You didn't say you want this or you don't want it.
Good, a good idea. Yes, I think that's a very real fear.
Well, during the pandemic, you were getting shots and you didn't know what you were getting, and a lot of people thought, well, maybe we're getting chips or.
Yeah, there can be a very real fear that you might accidentally get the mark of the beast. And so I want to, we should have some good knowledge as to what this is. If this, if you ever encounter this sort of thing with someone else, or just for your own reassurance. So let's read some Bible verses. Let's figure this thing out. Like I sort of led off with, a few weeks ago, I talked a little bit about the rise of the false church power. When we went out in the desert, and we found that the true church had somehow morphed into this false church power and has now grown up and is taking over. We're going to get to the end of that time, and that's crucial to understand sort of the cosmic events going on here with the seal of God and the mark of the beast. So let's turn to Daniel 7. Daniel 7, verse 25. There are 3 particular verses, and they all say a lot of the same thing. But we're going to read them all and sort of absorb what they say. This is Daniel 7, 25. And this is very familiar if you've gone to Revelation seminars. This one says, "He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, shall intend to change times and laws, then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time." Okay, so time, times, and half a time. This word that is translated time or times in here is actually an Aramaic word. I think there's something very nice about that. That it's not a Hebrew word. It comes from the Old Testament. It's an Aramaic word, and sometimes it means literally time, as in a given set of time. But sometimes it means specifically a year. Okay. And generally speaking, everybody that studies the Bible looks at that and translates that as a year. So this power that is going to persecute the saints is going to last for a time, times, half a time. That then translates into a year plus some more years we generally think of as 2 and a half a year. So that's 2.5 years. Or no, did I say that right? 3.5 years. I was actually good in math. Okay, so then we'll go to Revelation. So take it back to Revelation. And Revelation 13. And Revelation 13 is kind of the high water mark for Satan and his tribe. So once again, kind of a parallel verse to Daniel. He was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. Okay, so 42 months. So the one guy is time times half a time. That's a year, 2 years, plus another half a year. Here we've got 42 months. And guess what? If you take 42 and you divide by 12, you get the 3.5. It's the same amount of time. Then it gets a little bit more explicit. If you back up from Revelation 13, you get back to Revelation 12. And in verse 6, it says, "Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, and they should feed her for 1,260 days." And you go ahead to verse 14 of Revelation 12. "But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, where she is nourished for a time, times, and half a time again." Okay, so this period that the saints of God are hiding from this power that's come along, then all of these things all of these things are equal. The 1,260 days, the time times half a time, the 42 months. Now I know, if you take a year and you go 365 and you multiply that out by the 3.5 and stuff, you don't get 1,260 days. But if you use the lunar calendar, which is what was used by most of that area, used a lunar calendar, and especially amongst the Jewish people, their calendar was a lunar calendar, and about 30 days, then everything works out. 30 days for a month, multiply all that out, it's 1,260 days. Okay, so that's not very long. 3.5 years, wow. We can get by on that. But then, as these people were reading their Bibles and figuring all these things out, they were reminded of a couple of things. Let's take a look at Numbers 14:34. Now, I know many of you have heard this little exercise many, many times. So that's why I'm kind of rolling through it a little bit. But in Numbers 14:34, Joshua and Caleb and all these other spies have gone into the land of Canaan. Everybody else is out, ready to cross over into Canaan. They're going to take over the land. And these spies come back and says, oh, we can't do it. We'll never make it. And everybody says, oh, no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to go where God says we're going to go. And so God says, okay, don't go into the land. I don't want you to go into the land. Instead, we're going to go back out to the desert. And in a part of that, he says this in verse 34. According to the number of days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, for each day you shall bear your guilt 1 year, namely 40 years. Okay. There's another place in the Bible, too, which has the same thing. I won't read it to you, but if you want to, if you can't remember what it is and you want to write it down, Ezekiel 4:6. It's Ezekiel 4:6. And it's the same sort of concept there. And that is that a prophetic day, if somebody's giving you prophecy and telling you that it's so many days, then each one of those days translates into a literal year. So from 1,260 days, we now get 1,260 years. All right? Okay. So now, when we go back and look at those prophecies in Daniel, and we look at those prophecies in Revelation, and we see that whatever this power is going to persecute the saints and be in charge and tell people what to do and all that for 1,260 years, and then we start looking around for, okay, so when is this happening? Remember, this is a religious power. This is somebody that's trying to affect your relationship with God. Telling, well, God wants you to do this. God wants you to do that. You have to do this. You have to do that. You have to worship in a particular kind of way. This is a relationship between God and people, and this power is saying, no, I'm going to persecute you because you believe one thing about God, and I want you to believe something else about God. We're looking at a religious power. So a religious power who is in power for 1,260 years. And unfortunately, what we find is it's the church. And the predominant church at that time. Now, here's where I'm going to differ from a lot of people that might be standing up and talking about this. I look at this not so much as an end time where, boom, now everything is different. And I know that many people in here know about that in 1798, Napoleon sent a general by the name of Berthier down into the the Italian peninsula. Sorry about that, over there in Squim, and captures the Pope. All right, but you don't. A lot of people don't. I mean, they just take that and they say, okay, well, that's the end. But there's a lot of stuff happening, and I don't know if it's, for me, it's more of a case of a growing consideration. I mean, Martin Luther, we're 500 years away from Martin Luther, and we're 400 years away from the Church of England and some of those other things, where there's a growing sense that people are dissatisfied with the church, and they're looking for more, and even after 1798. In fact, I made some notes here. Just a moment. So in 1798, the Pope was captured. Everybody points to that and says, okay, that's the end of it. But in 1802, Napoleon goes to the Pope and say, hey, come back. And then in 1809, Napoleon kidnaps the Pope again and holds him and says, I want the Papal States, that's like the central part of Italy. Says, you don't get the Papal States anymore. I want them. And the Pope refuses. No, I'm not going to do that. Eventually, in 1813, the Pope says, okay, you can have the Papal States. And of course, a year later, Napoleon dies, he doesn't die. Napoleon is defeated, and then the other people come in and they restore the Papal States back to the Pope again. There is a growing sense then, by the middle of the 1800s, and you get things like in Switzerland, they have what's called the Sonderbund War in 1848. And part of that was to throw the Jesuits out. We don't want any Jesuits here. A lot of anti-Catholic sentiment. In 1871, in Germany, in Prussia, there was what was called the Kulturkampf. And the big part of the Kulturkampf was to get religion out of the administration of Germany. And so there was a continued growing sentiment, starting clear back, like I say, with Martin Luther and with the Reformation and some of those early things, growing stronger and stronger and stronger that the church was not in charge of what you and I believe about God. But what's interesting, and I'm sorry for the history lesson. I did pretty good in history too. It wasn't just math. But in 1638, there was a conflict between the Scottish Presbyterians and the English Episcopalians. And the Scottish Presbyterians were called Covenanters because they signed a covenant. And part of that covenant was that there was no one between God, between Jesus Christ and his church. And amongst the Episcopalians, that is to say the Church of England, yes, Charles I was the head of the church. So there was a combined church-state power of which Charles I was the head of. And the Covenant says, no, that's not the case. And you know what happened? Persecution by Protestant Church of England against Protestant Scottish Presbyterians. A lot of stuff happening in all of this. Okay, so, sorry for the history lesson. I hope I didn't go on too long there. Yeah, I'm not doing too bad. What did this mean for the ordinary fellow, the ordinary peasant fellow, for the craftsman, the blacksmith, the fellow that owned land and harvested it? What did it mean for this revolution in how people perceived God? From the time when the church told you, from the moment you were born practically, the church baptized you, the church said, you must do these things, so on and so forth, all the way to death, and then after death, they said. And now we have a situation where people said, you know what? There's not going to be anything between me and Jesus. What does that mean? What is that going to mean? Let's put you in the midst of this sort of evolving this evolving state of affairs. Okay? How do you react? What is it like for you? How is your life different?
think back then, most of the populace was not educated at all. They didn't go to schools. So I think a lot of them just went with the flow because they knew nothing else. In fact, they probably thought that everyone was trying to destroy the church that they had been gone to. So probably very mixed feelings, mixed emotions as to what should I do. Because they didn't have Bibles back then.
Let's talk about that for a moment. It's now 1798. It's now 1844. Do they have Bibles?
Probably a lot of them do.
Yeah. Yeah, I would think that thanks to the Gutenberg press and movable type that Bibles were in the hands of many people.
Okay. One thing is, could they afford a Bible under the conditions that they were? Most of them were in a feudal system, and even I, as a Catholic, in 1960, was invited to a Baptist church for a VBS, and we had no Bible. I don't know of anyone in the church that had a Bible.
I find that actually very remarkable. But let's just say, before I move on, let's just say that, or let's just ask then, are Bibles something that could be gotten? Good. Yeah. You're shaking your head, yeah. Okay. So getting a Bible was easy enough, or having access to a Bible was greatly enhanced. You think? Okay.
When I went to this Baptist VBS, the priest told my mother, get him out of that immediately. And of course, the Baptists used the Bible. We didn't have one. And in fact, we were taught that the Catholic Church uses tradition along with the Bible, so no one questioned it.
Okay. No one questioned it, or not many. That's what Roger said there. Okay. But the thing is that starting at that time, people could question. Oh, I see it. Let's go this way. What? Okay.
Like back when I grew up, we went to a Catholic church, and the Bible was very seldom used in that church. And then I changed to the Lutheran church, and the Bible wasn't used a lot there either. Until I came here, the Bible is active in my life, and when that happened, I started having a more personal relationship. And I think that's one of the things that, from back to what you're talking about, is the priest was usually their go-between. They looked at their relationship with the priest was more important than the relationship with God. And I think that's where a lot of heresies started coming.
Good. Okay. So we start having a time where people can read the Bible, when people can make some choices, where people don't just sit by the status quo, and that they begin to examine their lives a little bit, and sometimes they decide to reject entirely the idea of God, the idea of religion. Let's go to the next verse that we have in our lesson is 2 Thessalonians 2. 2 Thessalonians 2. And it's interesting to me to see how all of this sort of fits together. And that's what I'm hoping to sort of get across here, is that in an age when people can make choices, when people don't just have the religion placed upon them, that sometimes you can make choices not for God, but they're still your choices. 2 Thessalonians, and I'm going to start reading chapter 2. I'm going to read what it had in the lesson, verses 3, 4, and then 9 through 12. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come. And by that day, he's talking about the day of the Lord, okay, or the day of Christ coming. That day will not come unless the falling away comes first and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. The coming of the lawless one, this is now verse 9. The coming of the lawless one is, according to the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders, and with all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this reason God will send them strong delusions, that they should believe the lie, that they all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Oh dear. Oh dear. Okay, so rather than throw these things out as questions, I'm just going to comment here a little bit about this. So when you have a choice, when people, when it isn't just, you just do what you're told, but when you actually read the Bible and you have choices and you deny and you say, well, I don't want to have anything to do with that, and you discover that in the temple of your being, in your temple that God says that you are the temple of the Holy Spirit, when you are in the temple and you find the man of perdition is there. I mean, when Satan has come in and he's taken over, and rather than that destroying you, instead God says, okay, all right, I'm just going to say that's okay. How often do you come across the person that says there is no God, I'm not going to believe in God, and look, my life is fine, okay? That's the delusion, right? So you have people making choices, and you discover that within that the man, instead of God being sitting upon the throne of your heart, it's Satan sitting upon the throne of your heart. Now I want to move on. I do try to do about 40 minutes here, and then there's always extra pages going on, because we want to get to the crux of the whole thing, right? We want to get, what's the difference between the seal of God and the mark of the beast? Let's take a look at Revelation 14, please. Revelation 14, and I'm going to start reading in verse 1, because in verse 1, it's talking about the seal of God. And then we're going to go down a little bit, and we'll read about the mark of the beast. Then I looked, and behold, a lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his father's name written on their foreheads. Okay. Having his father's name written on their foreheads. Last week, Dick read a verse. We can read it right now, but basically it talks about how the angels are holding the four winds back, and another angel comes down. Don't let the four winds go until we've had a chance to seal the people of God. Okay? So here we have 144,000, and they are sealed with the name of God on their foreheads. Now we're going to jump down a little bit to the third angel's message, which is in verse 9. If anyone worships the beast in his image and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. I'm going to pause there because I just want to get this one little thing out there. God, it seems, as I'm reading this, that God sets his seal first. God goes through. I'm also going to just mention something. We're not going to read it, but Ezekiel 9. In Ezekiel 9, this is the story of the man in white linen. And the man in white linen is told by God, go start at the temple. Go start at the very center of religious worship in the Jewish community, and go there and seal the people of God. It isn't said that way, but that's what it means. Go through and seal the people of God. And then whoever doesn't have that seal, those people are destroyed. Okay? Now, we have the same sort of situation here where you've got people that are sealed. And then we have this thing talking about the mark of the beast that's coming. What is the criteria? That's it. What is the criteria for receiving the mark of the beast? Okay? Any thoughts? What's that? Okay, keep the commandments of God. That is, if you keep the commandments of God, will you receive the mark of the beast? No, you won't. What will you get? You'll receive the seal of God. If you keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus, it says that's the saints. The saints do that, and they receive the seal of God. So, everybody that has the seal of God, what do the other people get? The other people get the mark of the beast. That's right. So ultimately, who gets the mark of beast? Everybody that doesn't get the seal of God. That's right. That's right. There's not a place where Satan goes first, or the beast goes first, and stamps out the mark of the beast, and then God comes along and says, "Oh no, I got the mark of the beast on this guy. I can't give them the seal of God." No. God chooses those people, those saints that follow that are obedient to his commandments, have the faith of Jesus, and everybody else receives the mark of the beast. Is there a third option? I see a lot of shaking heads. There is not a third option. That's the whole point. Story of the wheat and the tares, there's wheat, there's tares. Story of the goats and the sheep, there's goats, there's sheep. There's nobody in the middle. You have to choose. Are you going to choose God, or are you going to let the mark of the beast come because you decided not to choose God? But the point, and bell's already rung. Okay, so the goats and the sheep. I want to go back. Rather than read that, I think we know the story. The goats go on one side, the sheep go on the other side, and Jesus says to the one side, "Come with me. You did all of these things." But none of that says you kept the Sabbath. Nobody in the story of the sheep and the goats, you can read through there, it never says you keep the Sabbath. Why is Sabbath, this is going to be my last question, I guess, why is Sabbath the test of loyalty? And is Sabbath the test of loyalty if you are keeping Sabbath? I see some heads shaking no. Why? I thought Sabbath was the test of loyalty. I'm coming back to you, man.
When you keep the Ten Commandments, you keep them all. You try to keep them all. And the Sabbath is only a reflection of keeping the commandments. It doesn't necessarily give you the pass of going to heaven. It's the personal relationship with Christ that's important.
Awesome. Got to keep all 10. So you can eat. I mean, you can be coming to church. You could be right here with us this morning. And I hope that's not the case, but you could be right here this morning. And there's something in your life. Something in your life that is keeping you from getting the seal of God. One more thing. I keep saying one more thing. The Day of Atonement. Remember, though we were talking about the Day of Atonement, starts in 1844. It's a good thing it started in 1844 and not maybe 1644, prior to the end of the whole wound of the papal power, because those people didn't have a choice. Those people didn't have as much of a choice. Now we're getting to this time when the choice is yours, and now that's when we come to the time of the Day of Atonement and the Day of Judgment. And the idea that you should be preparing yourself for a time when Christ will come again. You should be looking, and when you read about the Day of Atonement back in Numbers and in Leviticus, it talks about the people afflicting their souls. They were thinking about their lives. And those that did not afflict their souls, those people were put out of the camp. He said, "Oh, I'm sorry. You have sin in your life. You are unwilling to give that up." I'm not sure who told that people that, but that was the idea. Was at the end of the day, there were two kinds of people. There were the people that were in the camp at the end of the Day of Atonement, and then there were people that were outside the camp. And that choice was with those people. The choice is yours. The choice is mine. Making that choice. And you didn't have to make that choice. I mean, you didn't have to wait until the sun was almost down on the Day of Atonement. Oh, I'll choose now. You could choose to have a relationship with God. You could choose to let God into your life in the morning, in the afternoon, whatever that time was. You could look at yourself and say, I'm going to choose God. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to choose God for my life. And at the end of the day, and there was always an end of the day. There was a dividing line. And at the end of that day, there were people that were in and there were people that were out. Okay. They say in Harlan County, there are no neutrals there. You'll either be a Union man or a thug for J.H. Blair. Oh, which side are you on, friend? Which side are you on? Let's pray. Dear Lord, please work on our hearts. Help us to afflict our souls. Help us to look, is the man of sin on the throne of our temple? Help if there are things in our lives that might keep us from getting the seal of God. Help us, Lord, to throw those things off. Or throw those things off for us. Help us to fall on you. Please, Lord, be with your people. Help us to grow in your grace constantly, every single day. For Jesus' sake, amen. Thank you, everybody.